Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Salt of the Street studio. Today's Friday, and that means it's time for beer time with Big Bird. And today, huge shout out to, you may know him as Vipe69 on the Twitch, although he's been rather inactive on Twitch recently, or if you are a listener or viewer of the Salt of the Streets podcast, you may know him as the great and powerful William Wallace. He sometimes shoots fireballs from his eyes and lightning bolts from his arse. But today, he was absolutely fantastic and brought me this Elysian Dragonstooth Stout. He's a stout drinker. He's a dark beer man, and he's a huge fan of the stout game. And he was a little offended almost in a way when we had our Omen episode. Our last Elysian Stout that did not service very well. So we're going to go ahead and get into this here in a second. I'm just now realizing that I don't have a bottle opener, but that's okay because we can make shift. We can make do with what we have around us. It's amazing what you can use to open up a bottle opener. Oh, see, right here at the desk, okay? Right here at the studio desk, I have two implements that I know I can open up this bottle of beer, which happens, by the way, we should remark real quick. Elysian always does fantastic labels on their beers. This one is just, far and away, I think my favorite because I'm a dragon. Sorry about that. I'm a dragon enthusiast. I was going to say something else, but we won't do that because we're going to keep this one family friendly. Other than William Wallace and lightning bolts out of his arse, but we're gonna crack this open. I have scissors and I have a lighter with a cute little puppy on it. So I think we're gonna forego the possible injury associated with the scissors here, and we're just gonna use this here fancy lighter to pop this bad boy open. Hi-ya! Shenanigans. You may have heard that. I can't quite tell. You can't see it in the shop, but I got some kegs over here. 1, 2, 3, 4 kegs that are empty, ready to be filled with beer. But before we can even begin to think about that, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But we're going to pour this fantastic stout out into this sweet mug glass. And we're not going to pour a really bad... We're not going to have a bad pour today. We're not going to have a bad pour today. We're not going to have a bad pour today. We are definitely not going to have a bad pour today. Look at that. Try and say some shit, Donovan. Just kidding. As we all know here at Beer Time with Big Bird, sometimes watching the travesty or the sometimes epic failures of the pour game is half the fun. But today we didn't do that. Oh, today... Okay, before we did, this smells just fantastic. I'm dying here. We should talk a little bit about this beer. It's from Elysian Brewing. Once again, we have lots of Elysian beers that we're going to do here on the channel because they're local from Seattle. They're massive. I believe they're partly owned by Anheuser, but I'll have to check on that. But hey, puppers! So the barking begins. Today, this is not just a regular stout. This is what we call an oatmeal stout, which is going to bring on lots and lots and lots of creaminess, which is just something I really expect from a lot of stouts. I want that smooth, creamy ride all the way through my beer when I'm drinking a stout. And I think that's partly why I didn't like that last Omen stout we did. It just did not have any smooth factors, and there was no like base round kind of weedy malt to kind of help spread out the acridness of like the darker malts that you get for a nice dark beer. This one, however, we went ahead and pulled this up. This has got a really nice malt profile here. Everything from the pale 2-row malt with some Munich malt, some C77, which is a crystal 77. It's a pretty dark roasted barley malt, along with a chocolate and some just straight up roasted barley, and of course the roasted oats for the oatmeal stout. With the roasted barley and the roasted oats in this one, we are going to have a very pleasurable experience when it comes to texture on the mouth. And I'm tired of talking about it, so we're going to drink. Cheers. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. We can relax now. Everything's fine. Everything's going to be okay. This is fantastic. Shout out William Wallace. My man hooking me up with a real life stout. Oh, it's so good. Right on the front. We're going to top her off just because, I mean, it's so good. How can you not do it? Oh, right on the aroma. I mean, I don't want to say burnt. It's a bad word. We don't use bad words when we're describing something we like. It's a very dark roast, and you can smell the darkness. You can smell that really, really roasty. Kitty cat, what are we doing? Don't touch the Raycons. Good kitty. But yes, it's a very, you could taste the chocolate malt. You could taste that kind of bitterness from the C77. And, of course, our, crazy cat today. All the animals today are unruly. They must know it's Friday and they want to party. But first, we got to do a beer show. So everybody calm down. We're going to calm down. We're going to drink this beer. Oh, yeah. As Elysian likes to say, it's a deep midnight black when you pour it with a nice light tan head, which I can confirm. Smells of coffee and dark chocolate. Can confirm. Velvety smooth. Can confirm. We'll just double check. Yes, definitely velvety smooth. Thank you to the oats that are in this thing. Really giving this thing a nice body, nice smooth ride all the way down from the tip of your tongue to the cesspools of your stomach. But anyways, enough about this fantastic beer. I think it comes in around 8 point something percent. What are we looking at? I mean, it's a pretty heavy stout, so it's going to be quite stout. 8.1%. Comes in this fantastic 22-ounce bottle, which we always love a nice 22-ounce there, because it's enough beer for now and a little bit more for later. But now that we've tasted this thing, we've smelled it, and all the goodness, get the mic out of the shot, we're going to just relax because it's Friday. We're going to talk a little bit more about the development of our Salt the Streets brewing situation coming up. I've got a little bit of housekeeping, if you will, about where I'm going to be at for the next week and a half, because it ain't going to be here. And we'll just see where it takes us. First and foremost, the housekeeping. Let's talk about what's happening. If you are a fan of the regular podcast, the Salt the Streets podcast, you would have heard this a little bit by now, but I am leaving town starting basically now. And then I'm going to be out of town for a wedding, going all the way over to the left coast, right coast. Yeah, we're on the left coast. We're going to go to the right coast, a.k.a. the east coast, which is not the right coast. Problematic. But we're going to go hang out in New York. We're going to hang out in New Jersey. We're going to go to Massachusetts. And then we're going to go up to New Hampshire and get this man that I love so much. And you've seen him on the channel right here, Puppet Neal special. I don't remember what episode, but it's a special. You'll see it. It's in the YouTube. Go check that out. You'll see one of my best friends came all the way out here, asked me to be his best man. And now I feel really bad because I feel like I should be doing this beer in my best man beer horn up there, the drinking horn. But, hey, maybe we'll do another one. How about that? We got to make sure that it's unsullied with anything but mead until after the wedding. Then it's just game on. So that's where I'm going to be, but don't worry, have no fear. We're going to have another beer show next Friday, and just the same old, not the same old, because we are going to miss a show from the podcast because I'm not going to be here. But we're going to have lots of content every day, Monday through Friday. Same things coming out. We got lots of exciting stuff coming out. The Patreon, if you're a fan of the Salt the Streets podcast, we have our monthly write-ups where we're going to be writing little articles and opinion pieces and stuff like that, and you can find that only on our Patreon, but you can get it the $5 tier. I think it's tier 2, so make sure to head on over to patreon.com/saltthestreets. Make sure you're subscribed. You'll be supporting us here. You'll be making more and better content, as Donovan likes to say, and that carries over into the beer show. So make sure you go over there, check that out. And we're also going to be dropping the standard. We still have a couple parts left to release from the last episode, the epic 6.5 hour long episode. So we're going to be dropping some more of those. We've got some more clippies coming out. End of the month, we got our review preview. Donovan's going to be doing the review preview for, we got 2 books that he was going through the review of, the Indifferent Stars Above, which is that book about the Donner Party that has just been so powerful. He's been working through, and then he's previewing the Rubicon. I want to say it's Tom Holland, the historian, but it's all about the fall of the Roman Empire and Caesar's death throes, if you will. It's going to be fantastic. I'm very excited for that one. So again, if you want to see that and you want to check that out, make sure to follow us, subscribe, like, comment, share the whole 9 yards, and you'll get it right here on Salt the Streets channel. So enough about that. Let's get back to beer. Once again, I wish, actually, I still do have some of the Omen left. I think I've hate drank 2 more since the show. And I've tried to give them away, but nobody seems to want them. I don't know. You tell somebody that a beer is crappy, and then you're like, hey, do you want some? And they're like, no. So I still have a couple of those in the fridge. Hate drinking those, and I feel like I should be doing a side-by-side comparison right now, but I also don't hate myself like that, so I wouldn't put myself through that, because that beer is just not for me. This one, however, is fantastic, which begs the question, we're going to have to talk to Donovan and see what his thoughts are on some of these darker beers. He's pretty adventurous with the beers these days. How adventurous are you guys with beers? Are you kind of finding your own lane? William Wallace is pretty much a dark beer guy. He likes stouts and the occasional porters. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I'm pretty sure that's about all he'd be interested in. Some people just like the IPAs. Some people won't touch an IPA. What are your favorite beers? What do you like in a beer? What do you not like in a beer? Because I want to drink those beers too. I like all beers. I like sour beers. I like Abbey ales. I like the real fruity ones. I like the real stiff ones. The only one I don't like is that an Omen one that we did a couple weeks ago. Screw that beer. Raspberry stout. Not even a stout. Ugh. Anyways, I started thinking about it. Stouts are not a difficult beer to make. I'll say that much. There is a little bit more involved, and I think we talked a little bit about this last time. But when you're building your recipe, or you call it your malt profile, whatever it is, to get that really dark beer, you only take a little bit of grain. It really, it's easy to go overboard and completely ruin a batch of beer. But I still think I have my notes from when I used to brew pretty heavily, so I'm not afraid of brewing a stout. If you guys would be interested in having some of our stout, or watching me do a beer review of this stout that we may or may not make in the future, let me know in the comments down below. But I thought about it. I've played around with a couple ideas so far. Obviously, the IPA. It's a Pacific Northwest staple. So you can't have a brewery around here unless you got at least half a dozen IPAs to offer. Otherwise, I don't know what you're doing here. But I kind of want to steer away from it. We could make one. I'm not that concerned about it, but I'd be interested in kind of a malt-forward beer, if you will. Something that still tastes real malty and bready. We could do a stout. We could do an oatmeal stout that's safer. It helps mellow some of the acrid flavors out from those darker malts. That would not be a bad situation. We could do that. Even church it up maybe with some cocoa nibs in there and get some real solid chocolate flavor. When we're talking about this particular beer, they use a chocolate malt. Sounds fantastic. I generally try to taste my malts. It sounds weird. Before I finalize a recipe for a beer, I like to taste every one of the malts, because they're a barley and they are malted, so they are roasted for a period of time, just like a coffee bean is. I think, if I recall correctly, this isn't a coffee show, so I'm not that worried about it. Fact checked. Pretty sure a raw coffee bean is generally kind of white, or like kind of a light greenish color before they roast it, and they burn the crap out of it. and then you grind it up, and then you have the delicious brew we call coffee. Again, brew, though, I don't know. Do you need fermentation to be called a brew these days? I don't know. You brew a cup of coffee, right? Or you brew some tea. Maybe we should look up the definition of brew. That might be a fun thing. Let's see what happens there. But yeah, we could do some of that. But again, I like to taste these malts when I do that because it helps kind of set your palate to what you're working with. Would you cook a meal without having some kind of flavor understanding of what all the ingredients are doing? Generally speaking, you know what the spices taste like. You know that whatever protein base you're going to use, whether it's a beef or a chicken or whatever it is, you know what that generally tastes like and what you could do to it and what tastes good with it and what's not. The same goes when you're building a beer recipe. It's really no different. The blend in this particular one where we're talking the pale, the Munich malt is fantastic, by the way. I'm a huge fan of that one. You can cut that in at like 25% of your malt profile if you really want to go crazy, because it's a little, that one you could play around with a lot, and it's got a lot of great flavor and it could go a lot of fantastic places. Maybe we should make a pale ale, with a Belgian Munich malt base. Light bulb go ding. That might be a thing. But the chocolate malt that generally you find in a stout is really, really bitter and acrid when you first taste it, because that thing is, it's black. There is not a lot going on as far as chocolatey flavor. But by the time you add your water and you let the thing do the thing and the mash, and you, maybe we should talk about homebrew a little bit, even though we're not going to call it homebrew because I get offended that we call it home brew. It's just brewing. Let's talk a little bit about that before we get any deeper, because I think we should all have a solid foundation of understanding about beer and brewing and what it actually means, what is happening. Forgive me if I stumble a little bit, because this is something literally I just thought of. We're going to do this. Just drawn from my experience and what I know from brewing beer for a few years. Let's do this. We start with a grain bill or a malt recipe or a malt profile or something like that. You need a base malt, which is just a barley, a specific type of barley that is roasted at a certain temperature for a certain amount of time to give you malted barley. The idea there being is you take all that malt and you put it. Hey. The cat is just climbing around, guys. Why do we need to bark? Hey, bud. Hey, why don't you come here? You want to come up here? He says, nope, I don't want it. I'm just going to shut my mouth, Dad. Leave me alone. So you take your malted barley. Generally speaking, I'm not even pretending how much you need, but you need a decent amount, right? And you put that in some really hot water, generally around 140, 145 degrees. Temperature is important. You pour that into, generally speaking, some kind of insulated cooler. If you're doing brewing at home, the professionals actually have those big giant cylindrical things that they put all that stuff in, and then you add the hot water and you add the malt and you just boil it. You just let it do its thing. That's actually wrong. That is incorrect. You don't do that. You don't boil it yet. Boil the hot water. Get it to the right temperature. Pour it into the cooler. Then you add your grain in there and you mix it up. You get it all nice, and then it's going to smell just sweet. It smells fantastic. I can't even begin to tell you how good it smells. Then seal that thing up nice and tight. You want it to stay at that temperature for generally about an hour, which is why you need a good cooler if you're going to do this thing at home. So invest heavily on a solid cooler. Know that you can't use it for anything else, because we're going to have to do some things to this cooler to make sure that we can actually turn it and make it useful for brewing. So you let that stuff steep, kind of like a tea, for roughly an hour. And what that does is it pulls all the sugar and all the flavorings out of that roasted barley, and it creates what we call a wort, W-O-R-T. And that's the magical liquid that makes beer. It's barley tea, basically, if you want to think of it like that. So you let that sit for about an hour, and then you through a very simple process. If you know what you're doing, you essentially strain that liquid into a giant kettle. Sometimes you'll have to do what they call sparging. You'll add extra hot water, and it kind of rinses the rest of the sugars and deliciousness out of the malt. When we do our first brew day, we'll be documenting all this. It'll make much more sense. But yeah, you make your malt tea. You drain that stuff out. You pour some more hot water in there and kind of drain that stuff out, all into a big, like 6-gallon, 5.5-gallon kettle. You're going to throw that thing over the fire. You're going to turn the burner up, and then you're going to boil it for like an hour. And what that does is kind of take away a lot of the impurities that are in there, kills some bacteria, and it keeps your sugar, which is very, very important because yeast needs sugar to survive, and yeast will become very important very, very soon. So you boil that wort for about an hour. And then you're going to add your hops at certain points in that, generally late stage. Some of them are halfway through. Every recipe is different. The longer you keep your hops in the boil, the less aroma and hop flavor you're going to get. The acids that are in the hops will give it that bitterness that is so important. The hop profile for this, let's read that, for this Dragonstooth. You got bittered hops with magnum hops. So your bittering hops are the ones that you throw in during the boil. So you get a little bit of aroma, but not too much, but you get your bitterness from that. And then right towards the end, maybe even like the last 5 minutes, and it depends on what kind of beer you're doing, but right at the very end, you're going to add your last bit of hops. And those are your finishing hops. Those are your flavor hops. That's where you're going to get your aroma and that kind of taste on the tongue, because you're not burning off I don't want to say the terpenes. I don't know what they're called, but there's a specific type of acid or something like that comes out of the hops, and that's what gives it that nice hoppy flavor. But for this stout, they're going to throw them in right at the very end. You're going to hit them quick and pull them out because you don't want much hop flavor in a stout. Yeah, tasting it. I mean, you can, if you really think about it, you can get some hops in there, but it's a stout. It's not really, it's meant to be malt forward. So it's just basically all the deliciously roasted malts that you're getting right off the front. So anyways, that's done. You pull the hops out. You cool the wort down to a specific temperature, depending on whether you're going to be doing an ale or a lager. Generally speaking, we're going to be doing ales because, again, I don't have the technology right now. I don't have the infrastructure to do a lager. You cool it down to a specific temperature to where when you add the yeast into it, it's not going to be so hot to kill the yeast, but it's going to be a warm, comforting environment for them to just thrive and eat as much of that sugar that got pulled from the malts as possible. And I don't know, you've probably heard it before if you're semi-interested in the process of brewing beer. Colloquially, we say the yeast eats sugar and poops alcohol and carbon dioxide. So as the yeast begins to eat the sugars, it is giving you a byproduct of both alcohol, which ultimately leads to your ABV, and the carbonation. Not all beers, most beers, are not force carbonated. If you're going to bottle directly from your brew, you're not going to be adding extra CO2 to that. If you're going to go straight into a keg, like one of these bad boys here, you're going to go straight into a keg, you pop the top, just dump it right in here. It's been a while since I popped this, but oh yeah. Yeah, you're just going to pop the top, pull it out, and you're going to put your wort in there. And then you're going to put it on pressure with a big old can of CO2. And you're going to kind of let it do its thing. You're going to put it at pressure, and you're going to let it kind of force carbonate for it depends on what kind of recipe you're doing, but, a few days. And then you hook it up to the hose and pour yourself a beer. That's the easiest, basic way of breaking it down. So to rewind a little bit, going back to the chocolate malt and the roasted barley and the roasted oats that make this stout as good as it is. This is all done in very small amounts in that malt profile before you do anything. Your bag of beer tea is really it's going to be like mostly a very kind of generic kind of bland, small time SR2 malt, as we call it, or a pale malt. It's going to be the base of it, and there's going to be lots of sugars that come out of that. And then when you want some color added in there, you're going to look at your Munich malt, your crystal malts, various different types of other roasts that are going to have darker colors to them. You're going to add those in at small amounts to get color and flavor. But you add a little bit of chocolate malt in there, which they call it chocolate malt, I believe, because when you look at it in your hand after it's been roasted, it looks like dry pieces of like dark chocolate. I mean, this stuff is like darn near black. It is powerful stuff, so you only need a little bit. And if you add too much of that, you get that really burnt, acrid taste, which I think was really, really prevalent in that Omen beer we did. This has nothing like that. No acridness at all. You get that really, really toastiness from all those malts. They're perfectly balanced. God, man, I cannot tell you. When you want a good stout and you don't get it, it's like somebody punched you in the face. When you want a good stout and you get it, it's like cue the songbirds. And I mean, it is just relaxing. It's filling. It's fulfilling, which is really nice. And yeah, it's just generally pleasant to drink. It's the smooth texture goes down easy, just like this bad boy does. But yeah, I haven't quite figured out what we want to do as far as brewing yet. I know for a fact that when we have multiple beers going on, let's say I have 4 kegs here with me now. I can, as long as I can fit them in my beer fridge, which I'm pretty sure I can fit no more than 4. And there we can have up to 4 different beers on tap at any one point if we want. It's really not. I just figured out we're going to have to install one. Yep. We just came up with another idea. It's fine. But anyways, the brewing station outside has not changed since our last meeting last week. Been prepping for this departure. So we're making content. We're cutting content. We're scheduling content. We're having a good time. We're tying up loose ends at the office. It's been busy. So the brewery will hopefully be up by early summer, I think, at this point. It's not that much left to get in there. I do want to build what we call a new mash tun, or mash tune, if you will. And that's that cooler I was talking about earlier. It's kind of a cool deal, right? You can buy a cheap cooler, and they work relatively well. I think I brewed for about 4 years in the same just like $25 igloo I got at Walmart. The biggest thing you need to think about is size, because you're going to have to pour 5.5, 6 gallons of liquid into this thing. And then what you do is you take a cooler and you drill out a hole towards the bottom of it, and you put a little tap on there with a valve, and then inside the cooler you put a mesh screen. And what this does, it allows you to just open up that valve, drain out the wort while filtering out all that barley, and it prevents blockage and stoppage. Some of the pre-made ones you can buy are actually really, really terrible, and they clog really, really easy. So I always suggest people just build their own. It's super easy. All you need is a cooler, a little mesh screen, where if you actually have a brewing supply company somewhere around you, like we do, you can go pick it up for usually like $15. They're pretty cheap. Nice stainless steel. It's perfectly, set to go inside of a cooler. It's built for it. Excuse me. It's pretty fantastic. Or you can go online and Google it. You could probably buy one now for cheaper. Hell, I forget what I was going to look up earlier, but we're going to look up how much. We're going to look at a homebrew store online. Let's see here. Homebrewers Association, Sound Homebrewing. That seems like a local joint. Yep, you got everything you need right there. Let's see, that's a little expensive. Prices have gone up since last time I was brewing. This is going to cost me a little bit to get back in the game. But there it is right there. I'm looking at the part. One part $9.99. The other part $29.99. Okay, so there you go. So about $50 plus tax and all that normal stuff. It's doable is what I'm saying. That's going to be fun. Maybe we should make a video soon about the building of the new mash tun. But that's what you call it. You call it a mash tun. So I'm going to probably invest in something a little bit more sturdy than the old igloo that I used to have. I'm not going to get a super fancy one. I mean, hell, these days you can buy a cooler for like $1,000. The cooler game has changed exponentially since my days starting out brewing has been pretty crazy. But I think that'd be a good spot to do it. That'd be a pretty fun video to watch. Let me know. Would you guys be more interested in like some more homebrew videos? We could show you how to build a mash tun of your own while doing a beer review. I mean, hell, we're sitting here talking about homebrew now. Hi, bud. The dogs are going everywhere today. I don't know what's going on. But I think we're going to wrap it up today. Some just download of information for you. I'm going to put a few links in the description down below there for some brewing supply places that you can find online, and you can kind of, if you're semi-interested in this, take a look. We're going to be building a whole new setup here over the next few months, and you can build your home brew station along with us here at Salt the Streets. I hope you do that. It's a really fun time being able to like make your own beer. It's not really going to save you money. I'll say that much. It's not something you do to cut costs unless you drink more beer than you probably should every day. But yeah, it'll be fun. You can, I think from point A to point B, by the time we're actually brewing our first beer for Salt of the Streets, you'll have enough videos guiding you to be able to brew your own beer right alongside us as we do it. So look forward to that. I look forward to seeing you there. And until next time, cheers, everybody. Shout out, William Wallace. Thanks for the beer, buddy.
Welcome to the Salt of the Streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought.